Good morning, class. My name is Clarkson. Today I'll be talking to you guys about Jim Crow law. Jim Crow law is not only one of the worst things you could think of back in the 80s, 70s, 60s, but it's one of the things that really separated blacks and whites, which I thought wasn't fair. You got to think about the future, the next generation, how they got to grow up to live. Kids not being able to talk to their friends, or white kids not being able to talk to black kids because their parents is going for the Jim Crow law, which is separating whites and blacks, which means you can't use the same bathroom as a black, or you can't go in the same restaurant as a black, or blacks wasn't allowed in restaurants, or they weren't servers. Those are the things that you had to live with in life. In today's world, the Jim Crow law, racial segregation, it was more so between the South, and it ended in Reconstruction in 1877. One of the major things that really stood out to me as I did my research was, is Jim Crow law really over? Do you really think that it stopped? Do you think segregation is still going on? That's a question that I ask myself every day. Is racism still going on? Do you really think that's something that's going to stop? As generation goes and goes and goes, you start seeing like how things work. Start getting jobs. Even if you go find a job and your boss is white, he's interviewing you. Maybe you're not going to get a job because you're black, or maybe you're black, and it could be the other around, vice versa. More so to it, I just feel that things wouldn't stop. Things isn't going to stop because the simple fact is how this world is brought up. Jim Crow law. From the late 1870s, Southern state legislators, no longer controlled by carpetbaggers and freedmen, passed laws requiring the separation of whites from persons of color in public transportation and schools, meaning that you couldn't ride the bus with a typical black person. You couldn't drive in a car and have a black person by your side. It was no way that was going to go down. More so, if you did get on the bus, you would have to go all the way to the back. And that's something that I felt that wasn't fair. People fight for their freedom, and to know that you have to obey the law of not being able to bond with different race wasn't fair at all. In 1954, the Supreme Court reversed Plessy and Brown v. Board of Education of Topeka. It declared segregation in public schools unconditional, and by extension, the ruling was applied to other public facilities. In the year following, subsequent decisions struck down similar kinds of Jim Crow law legislation. And those kinds of outlaws are the reason why our generation today is the way we are. Most people aren't really into details like such as Jim Crow law, or even want to bring up things that happened back in the day, because the simple fact is it's bad. It's not good. And if we can look back in the day and see how things were done, we'll notice and see that things weren't fair. And if we could fix those kinds of things, it would be the best thing to do.
Alright, my name is Johnathan McFadden, and as you can see, Casey already gave you majority of the information, so I'm just going to give a little bit of brief information about it. So prior to the Civil War, the inherent status of slaves had made it unnecessary to pass laws segregating themselves from white people. Both races could work side by side as long as the slave recognized his subordinate place. In the cities where most free blacks lived, forms of segregation existed prior to 1860, but no uniform pattern emerged. In the North, free blacks also labored under harsh restrictions and often found even more rigid segregations than in the South. One might have expected the southern states to have created segregation systems immediately after the war, but that did not happen. In some states, the legislature imposed rigged separations, but only in certain areas. For example, an area would be like Texas. They required that every train have one car in which all people of color had to sit. The South had no real system of public education prior to the Civil War, as the post-war governments created public schools. Those were as often as not segregated by race. Nonetheless, New Orleans had fully interrogated schools until 1877. In North Carolina, former slaves frequently sat on juries alongside whites. And let's see. So in 1877, the Supreme Court ruled and held that states could not prohibit segregation on common careers such as railroads, streetcars, or even riverboats. In the civil rights cases, the court overturned key elements of the civil rights. And that's just about it. I just want to say thank you for taking your time to watch our video. From Johnny and Casey, Casey Clarkson. Thank you.